with that said, our host today will be Narayan. Do you want to just raise your hand up there, Narayan?
I hope everybody
Narayan
will just
Bharadwaj is
allow
our
me
SVP of automation. He is typically the host, but sometimes we may circulate hosts in the future. He has 20 years of leadership experience in banking and financial services technology and operations, and has worked at leading tech companies, global banks, and financial services organizations such as Quattro, Wipro, GE, and Citibank. So he'll be helping navigate some of those discussion points as we move forward. Welcome to Julie Lane. She is a digital product and strategy executive with nearly 20 years in financial services. Julie has led large-scale business transformations focused on acquisition, retention, risk, and new market growth across consumer lending, including mortgage banking, payments, and insurance. For the last 3 years, she has been working at AWS, supporting global financial services customers, focused on ways of working and business innovation. She is a passionate lifelong learner who enjoys the complexity in the ever rapid pace of change across financial services. Thank you, Julie, for joining. We really appreciate it. We also have Rajan Nair. He's a bit of a serial entrepreneur, if you don't know him. He has served as CEO and COO at various tech organizations, and he's currently CEO at Indicom, where he's spearheaded the expansion of automation technology, automation-enabled service for the mortgage banking industry. He's responsible for growing and advancing the organization, including operations, innovation, product development, global services, marketing, business development, and sales. So just a couple things on his plate. And then finally, we have Nathan Longfellow. Nathan comes from, I'm sorry, I have a little bit of a, I'm sorry if you see my screen. Sorry, there he is. Hi, Nathan. Nathan comes from a diverse career covering a wide spectrum of financial services. He has over 20 years of experience in developing and providing quantifiable value to leading financial services institutions. He has successfully led the development and delivery of technology and business solutions that address specific business challenges, risks, and objectives. And he's led digital and product strategy for many reputable mortgage organizations, such as Wells Fargo and Rocket Mortgage, and he's currently the head of residential lending technology at TD Bank. So thank you so much to our panelists for joining. I really appreciate it. With that said, I'm going to hand this off to Narayan to take the lead. And Narayan, if you want, we can launch into discussion, or we can do a quick survey. It's up to you.
Yeah, well, I'll just say, thank you for the context, Julie. I'm very excited to be a moderator of this panel. I think we have a great team of panelists across the spectrum. Julie represents really the tech provider, the global AI movement that is driving multiple industries. So she'll bring in the perspectives of that. And Nate is really, bringing in the experience of working across multiple lenders and consulting organizations and shaping up the strategy, business operations, and technology. And then Rajan, as a tech entrepreneur, has seen the evolution of this space over the past, I want to say, 2 decades. So I think it'll be a nice panel to moderate on these topics. So I'm really excited and looking forward to it. With that said, let's jump into the first question, Robin, and take a pulse for what the audience thinks.
Okay, I actually have them paired together, so we have 2 questions.
Sorry?
Okay. So the first question you'll see pop up is, what is the state of automated indexing and data extraction in your organization? Is it largely manual indexing using people? Are you indexing using automation over 90%? Or is there some mix, a hybrid of automated indexing, but still require over 50% of manual support? Okay. And then some of you have already moved on to question 2. So you sneaky folks, hold on one second. So as you can see, hold on. So the second question, since you can see it, I'll just drive right in. Where have you implemented document indexing or data extraction to enable automation? And it gives you a range of options here. Sorry, let's see. Okay. I'm still seeing a few, the bar moving a little bit. So I think we're good now. I'm going to end the poll, so it should pop up, folks. Let's see. Okay, so Narayan, you can go ahead and take it from here.
Right. So I think, I mean, it's pretty consistent with what we have heard and seen in the industry, and most of you must have too. The outcome is that most of the solutions that lenders are seeing are hybrid. There's still some automated indexing, but there needs to be a manual intervention to either curate the poor quality documents or to actually, just go ahead and index those manually just because the automated solution doesn't work on those, right? And in terms of where it has been implemented in a loan lifecycle, loan setup seems to be the biggest candidate here with about 89%. Followed by underwriting, interestingly, which is about 56%. And then processing and quality control come a close third at 33%. Very little in loan boarding at 11%. But I think that seems to be the landscape. And we'll talk through each one of these as we go through the panel and the questions, right? So I think this is a great start. It still says that, there's a great amount of improvement to be made. We'll peel those, issues one by one. Now, I want to start by asking you three, this document classification or indexing and underlying data extraction is actually a foundational element to any process, not just the loan manufacturing process, right, or a servicing process. But this has been an Achilles heel for over 2 decades, right? So what in your respective experiences have you seen as how this space has evolved over the past, 15, 20 years or so? Where do you think the opportunities lie? So I want to start by asking you, Julie, as a service provider, you see this across the industries, and you see this as potentially the number one AI provider into this industry. And you have a deep background in the mortgage industry too, across Wells, Freedom, and Union. So where do you see that landscape now? What have you seen? How has that evolution come along so far?
Yeah, it's a journey. So thank you again, Narayan and Robin and Nate and Rajan. It's great to be with everyone today. It's an evolution. It's a journey. For me, I'm also staring at 20 years in the industry, and it's a bit of a long journey. I gave an example of, I started in 2005 or so, and we were going to solve for an end-to-end digital mortgage. And for many who can smile along with me as we say that, it's still very aspirational. We now recognize that data is, as you said, it's the center of every process, every pre-approval, application, every business decision. But our data systems and our legacy processes are often siloed, they're fragmented, they're disparate, and quite frankly, they're sometimes inflexible or complex or error-prone. And the criticality to solve this really lies in the results. The lending costs are just too high. The customer experience misses the mark. And, the time required to close a loan continues to be extensive. So to me, we're making progress. We're definitely making progress, but there still is so much opportunity. And I love the way that the poll question asked it. You have to look at this over the life cycle of the loan. It's not just the setup. It's not just the onboarding. It's not just retention. It's how do you use that data, extract that data, and think of your value streams across the whole experience. So that's just some kickoff thoughts from my perspective.
Yeah. With that, Nate, I want to pivot to you. We talked about life cycle, right? Now, you've seen this, challenge across multiple lenders, over many years. Now, how have different lenders approached this? There are manual approaches, there are hybrid approaches. What have you seen work? How is the landscape of solutions across different lenders from your perspective, from what you've seen?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And thank you again for inviting me and Julie and Rajan as well. It's a meaty topic for sure. I think the biggest, difference between folks that are, I would say, more high performing in this space versus low performing are ones that think about it, and really along Julie's line of comments too, that think about it in line with the overarching problem we're trying to solve, which is how do we make decisions for consumers to put them in homes that make their lives happy and successful, right? And it's all those things connected. It's not just about capturing data, but it's how that data is used to automate and to make decisions. And those are the companies that are really leaning on that connective tissue between the data and the decisions that I think have the better implementation, or the starting of the better implementation of these types of solutions. And I think that's really the need. The LOS of today is really the LOS of yesterday. Trust me, I have great LOS partners. We're really good partners, but I'm also highly critical of them for all the points that Julie pointed out. They need to continue to evolve, and when you see solutions that are kind of hindered by what the LOS can offer. So what I mean by that is the LOS, the traditional LOS that most of us use, the 2 or 3 that are most predominant, many of them don't really have out of the box context to the deeper metadata that we need to make decisions. And that's that's one of the many missing links, but it really speaks to that fragmented nature that Julie spoke of. That's really why you're capturing data. You need all this great data to really leverage that data to drive decisions. But if your core systems can't use that data, can't reference it, can't persist it, that means you can't process it against rules. That means you can't leverage it against workflow. So the most you can get out of it, and that's why you see a lot of people say, yeah, I use data extraction, I use document indexing, and they kind of maybe shrug their shoulders a little bit. It's because they're only using it to identify what the document is. And most of the time, letting people then interpret that information. Sometimes you're doing deep data extraction, but you're still sending it to humans to go interpret that information, which really defeats the purpose of why we want these solutions. And I've seen the evolution of it as well. I think some of the evolving from the old school kind of XY coordinate data capture from documents, moving to more machine learning or AI. The machine learning and AI aspects are really, really great, but I still think we approach this as an industry as an all or nothing solution. Either it's going to give me all my data and the data is going to be perfect, or it's not. And the reality of it is those solutions are rarely good enough out of the box to be leveraged completely. You need human in the loop. You need really good data governance. You need really good data management to kind of solve for those gaps that we talked about earlier. And I think that's the companies that are looking at it from a data perspective and not from a process perspective. They're the ones that are going to get there faster. And whoever gets there faster is probably going to win greater share of the market too.
Yeah, no, those are great perspectives. I think, moving on to you, Rajan, from your vantage point, across multiple industries and across multiple tech companies, you have seen the growth or the transformation of this industry. Right? I know you've told me stories about document classification as being stored in shoe boxes, like 20 years ago, right? And how that has really evolved from there, right? So talk us through how you've seen this evolution of this industry and the embracing of technology and advanced technologies within the document indexing and data extraction space, right? And where do you see the gaps? Where do you see the opportunities?
Well, thank you, Narayan, and thank you for everyone for joining us. Nate, Julie, it's great to be on the panel. Answering that question will somehow kind of date me, but because I remember there was a time when we worked with very large title companies, title insurers, insurance companies in per se, who had like warehouses of paper that we digitized, right? I mean, this was in a different life. I've played many roles. So it was but that was 20, 25 years ago. It wasn't that long ago, but it's the change. When you look at it at a step back and you look at it, it's come a long way, right? I mean, paper's pretty much out of this process. There is still on the back end, on the post-closing side in the mortgage industry, there's still paper because there are still third parties and external agencies who are not yet ready to take in digital, but everything else is paper. So that's one development. But just generally in terms of the field that we're talking about here, which is to identify documents, put them into the right folders, name them properly. I mean, these things sound like, they sound like basic stuff. And in many ways it is, because when you look at the grand scheme of things from the mortgage to originate a mortgage, underwrite, close, fund, sell it, secondary marketing, servicing. I mean, these things seem to be pretty, down the totem pole. It seems like it, but if you don't have it done right there, it has a ripple effect across the entire process. It increases the amount of time that it takes. It leads to more errors. Things get missed. And I think that is something that the industry keeps resonating. I mean, in fact, the survey, it's a very high level survey. It's not very scientific, but it did reveal some of that. It reveals that still lenders and so even servicers. I mean, let's not leave services out of this. Lenders, servicers, they have to still rely on their staff to make sure that they look for the right documents in the right folders, that they're set up correctly. And then there is the whole data extraction piece, and I think what has happened is the industry has gotten much better. There's several technology solutions out there that do a great job. It's getting better in terms of being able to leverage some of the core technologies like ML or AI. And AI has its own dimension, and I'm sure we'll talk about it. No conversation is complete without getting into AI and what that really means. We'll get into it, but just being able to extract data. I mean, this is something that is such a common thing, and Nate, you touched upon this. It's like, okay, we extract the data. Now what do we do with it? Because the underlying system, which is the LOS, is still not quite there to have it be data driven, right? I mean, when I say that, I still will say that there's all the data is stored in the LOS, and many of them are fine LOS systems out there. But it's really having the process being driven by the data. That connection is not that seamless. Now, I think we need to also take a bit of a nuanced view. There is, depending on the type of business that we're talking about in the mortgage space, the data is more valuable. Like, for instance, anything that involves bulk acquisition, if it's a correspondent lender, if it's even if it's mortgage insurers, where there's the entire closed loan package is coming in, due diligence is another case. I think there's more use cases and applicability for data, right? Because the loan's already funded. Now you need to review the loan. Hopefully, that if this is where, as the industry adopts data extraction and automated indexing tools and products on the front end, if some of those things are already done correctly, the downstream work effect actually improves significantly, because there's a lot that gets done at these downstream acquisition channels because the front end process is not right. I mean, it's not working correctly. So the more that gets better, I think the secondary marketing or the secondary market, or just in terms of all the acquisition, that gets better. So this is far-reaching consequences to such a simple topic like indexing and data extraction. I mean, that's so it's how the dominoes all kind of come together. And therefore, I think this is a problem that does need attention. It needs discussion, and I'm glad we're discussing it.
Yeah, I think those are great points. What we are hearing consistently from all of you is that context and applicability of automation in the life cycle of the process is extremely important, right? So Nate, I want to ask you a couple of questions going back to that, right? Now, obviously, we saw from the poll that most of the participants used document indexing and data extraction at the top of the funnel, which is north of 80% in loan setup. And there are obviously a whole stream of downstream processes to that, right? From your vantage point and your perspective, where have you seen it to be the most effective in using extracted data, right, coming through that funnel? And then as a follow-up to that question, we talked about workflows and how they need to seamlessly integrate data with the workflows, right? So how do lenders take different approaches to integrate the document automation tools with existing workflows within their LOS servicing systems or other wraparounds that they may have? So we would love to hear your points of view.
Yeah, all of that is really all tied together. And I think it points to, the problem that really Julie touched on too, that fragmented nature of it. So when we talk about, well, where's the best place we've seen this? It's the lenders that are truly treating this as a technology industry, right? As a data industry. I was privileged to work with Rocket and help lead the design of what they refer to as Rocket Logic there, with really great leaders like Brian Woodring and Tila Matthias from the Phoenix Group, where they saw it and we all saw it as what it needed to be. Very unique environment there, though. right? Not everybody can build their own solutions. Not everybody has that investment dollars or that appetite or sees them in that way. So it's really, it really only exists, I think, in small and in large ways in these, I would say, places that see the problem holistically and have taken control and charge of the problem themselves. For everybody else, it gets back to really Julie's comment about this fragmented ecosystem. And the only way to solve for it is to start from kind of the inside out, right? Which is, what data do you need to drive decisions? What data and governance do you need to have around those decisions? How can that decision management also be distributed? Because we also think of this world as the point of sale system, as the loan origination system, as a documents, extraction provider, and I can keep going on and on and on. And there is no anchor to it. And I'll say that again, there is no anchor to it out of the box in this industry. It says, no, we got it, guys. This is the data ecosystem. Here's how decisions can be distributed to the point of sale. Imagine going into your point of sale and the very specific questions you're getting, the very specific documents you're getting align perfectly to the LOS. They don't today. And if anybody says they do, they're not fully informed. It doesn't. That's why there isn't that. That's why it still takes 40 some odd days, because you do all this great automation up front, or this data management up front, and then you pass it to humans in the back and they revalidate all this data-driven stuff. So I think that's kind of the issue of answering the question of who does this well, or where in the process does it well. I think it all needs to be done at the point of sale. I think it all needs to be done up front, and I'll say it more specifically, at the point of engagement for the customer. But it really needs to be centralized. Key parts of it absolutely need to be centralized, and that's the only way it'll ever work. And the one main reason why is, there's one thing that's certain in this industry, is that data will change, and you can't treat it like a credit card transaction. We can't, at the point of sale, pull in your income, run your credit, run to you, import your assets. It's a really good customer experience, but it means nothing unless we can actually do something about it or leverage that in a persistent, contextual way. And that's what happens with point of sale sometimes. We treat it like a credit card transaction, but the data is going to change seconds, minutes, hours later. And so you need a solution that manages that data contextually and allows these different services to run and be consumed.
Yeah.
So,
and
if you can do that, yeah.
And I'm smiling because a few years ago, I bought a property and I applied for a mortgage with a leading lender. So I go fill in everything online, submit all the documents, right? And then, I get an email with a lengthy needs list and with the name of a processor. And I said, you know what, I've submitted all this. So I email the processor back, and the processor tells me, oh, just ignore what you get from the portal. I'll tell you what we need. So there's this clear, what I call a digital dissonance between what's in the front end to what's in the middle and back office. And it's classic, right? If you leverage the data accurately, you wouldn't have this dissonance between the different, front office and middle office systems within a lender.
Yeah. And there's such symbiotic relationships. And working with all these companies, I don't think anyone's against doing it. There's just no anchor to do it. So we have to do it. We have to do it as an industry. We have to pull the right partners together, innovate with them, so that we have a common vision of how these things work together. And that's where your other question around workflow comes into place. Workflow is limited in today's traditional world. I mean, trust me, you're going to get spectrum, people that can do this stuff really well, people that are, I would say, more traditional. Workflow can't be, hey, processor, go look at this and see if there's a problem. Hey, underwriter, go look at this and see if it's a problem. It has to be very discrete and specific. And if you do that, we can solve for the ebbs and flows of staffing up and staffing down. We all have to staff up really intelligent and experienced processors and underwriters when volumes are high. And then, of course, we go through the horrific job of staffing down when times are low. Instead, if we treated it as, I'm going to get the right task to the right team member at the right time, I don't need to use an underwriter to process all decisions. I need to use an underwriter where I have really more complex decisions that require deeper interpretation that systems couldn't do. And all that can be solved with just a deeper management of data that supports all this stuff.
Yeah, no, those are excellent points. This brings me to a very interesting point of view. When we typically see a problem and when we have a solution, right? When you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So Rajan, I think, if the consistent answer is that we need more data, there is typically an urge, like today, everything is Gen AI problem today, right? regardless of what the underlying business requirement is. So what risks do you see as a provider that lenders need to hedge against, by relying solely on automation, right? What are some of the caveats that they should watch out for?
I mean, I think
especially in a data-intensive process like this.
Yeah, and love to hear Julie's point of view as well, because Julie sees this from from outside the mortgage industry. Right? I mean, AWS. I mean, you have so many, especially financial services. So it'd be great to get a kind of a broader perspective. But I'll speak for just what we see in our industry. I'll answer that question in two parts. One is the AI, non-AI, right? Generally speaking, relying purely on automation. Firstly, I think it's just pragmatic, sensible to acknowledge that given the complexity of the mortgage process itself and the amount of touch points that it has, now we can all argue that it shouldn't be that complex. We're deep in the nuts and bolts, so that's what we see. The reality is that for something as complex, there isn't a seamless automation, that everything's going to be working clean, smooth, without any human intervention. There's always going to be human intervention. So is this over-reliance on automation? The question is, where do you draw the line? When it comes to many of those functions that we saw, setup, processing, underwriting, as you go through it, as you get deeper and deeper, you need eyes on it. But the question is, how do you make those people performing those functions more effective, more productive, focused on the right things? And that's really where automation starts coming in a big way in terms of improving the output of the quality and the timeliness of the output of all those resources that you have. And you can expand your resource base, as Nate mentioned. You don't always need an underwriter with 35 years of experience to underwrite every single loan. You can now start creating different staffing models. So that's kind of one, I would say, kind of aspect of automation, and the right combination of the human and automation working together. Now, when it comes to Gen AI, and since any conversation now in automation is incomplete without going there, there's a lot of potential from using and deploying generative AI for just what the problem statement we were talking about is, to process documents, extract data, just layer on logic on top of it. But we know that AI can hallucinate. AI does hallucinate. AI, it's only as good as the prompts that are written to drive it. Plus, also, there's so many changes. There is like a new version of an AI model that's coming out every day. And they're getting better and better. But then the question is, where do you draw the line? As you deploy, you've got to pick certain platforms, some stack, and you got to work on that. But as you now start deploying them, what we see, I think what we're going to see is increasingly companies are going to be very sensitive about AI-driven solutions to drive decisions. I think that's one of the things that they're going to see is this notion is AI driving the entire decision cycle, or is it predicting a decision, whether is it determining a decision? So there is that deterministic versus predictive aspect that's gonna come to light, right? It's AI that's used more for deterministic aspects, like running rules, right? If this exists, check if this exists, check if this exists in the file, check if this matches the address is matching from the 1003 and the note. Those are examples. That's deterministic. It's not predicting anything, but AI is very good at it. The cost is lower. So there's definite use cases that are going to come up even in this topic that we're talking about, which is indexing and data extraction. But as long as, and companies are going to increasingly expect third parties and service providers to demonstrate that they're not using it to drive predictions, they're not relying this on, there is no human controls over it. And that's, I think, something that's going to be very real. And also regulators. I think regulators are going to step in as well, because that's something that scares a lot of them, right? In terms of this notion, and part of it is just the hype of AI, right? There's this thing where there is this human-like AI bot sitting there and making all these decisions and controlling people's lives. We all know that's not the case, but service providers, technology providers will have to demonstrate how they are, using AI to be able to determine outcomes and rather than predict outcomes. So just I know there's a lot I said there, but I think in terms of it's a partnership between the automation and the human, and the right, the companies who are going to get it is who find the right mix, right? And again, it's all, as long as it's driven through the data is driving the process, and you have the humans at the right places, you're going to start seeing the real lift that you can get from automation.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
Sorry.
No, go ahead, complete.
No, I was just going to ask Julie. I mean, maybe she can chime in on from her perspective what she sees.
You saw me smiling and nodding there, and great points all around. I agree with everything. I'm going to throw one little other variable into the mix, if I may. I had a really great mentor early in my career, and his role was to mind meld 35 years of mortgage expertise. And this is way before all this technology and automation. This is files were this thick. And one of the things that stayed with me through the length of my entire career has been never lose sight. It's a people business. And that's really important when we're talking about all of this. So people business, no one wants a mortgage. No one wakes up in the morning saying, I want a mortgage. They want a home. They want family celebrations. No one's saying, I want to leverage my home equity. They want to have big family dinners and celebrations and have a dream kitchen. And when you lose sight of that, I think that's where, whether it's AI, technology, automations, you lose the customer in the vision. And I love the way that this panel is thinking about it, from early lead generation campaign all the way through to servicing and retention. It's not one part of the journey, it's the whole thing. And you've got to plan for people. And people, whether it's your internal teams or the customers you're serving, remembering that your internal teams, the rate of change, the pace of change, the upskilling, the reskilling. I mean, I've had people, just to tell them to upload and index a file over here versus here, it was weeks of coaching, and I'm sure everybody on this call has had that. But remembering that people are messy. It's a messy business. Mistakes are going to happen. You can't get so locked in and reliant on your technology. And I think this goes to your point about AI. You never want to be that reliant on anything, because you're still going to need that sensibility. There's still going to be lone exceptions. So I would say go into all of the space over how are you accommodating people's needs, your team's needs, as well as your customer needs, and never lose sight of the people at the end of this, because I think sometimes in technology, if anyone's saying everything's going to be solved, and I think you said it well, Rajan, not anything is going to sprinkle magic, and loans are going to go from early ideation of a campaign right on through. Do I think we can get a lot better? And Nate made some great points about the downstream systems, but we've got to really handhold the idea that there's people behind every one of those files. So little spin on the same topic.
Yeah. Let me just add something too on the AI front here too. The easiest way for me to always explain my position on AI is it's a little bit of a hammer looking for a nail. I'm still waiting for my blockchain mortgage because it's a solution, looking for a problem, right? And there really is a problem in the middle of all that, but everyone talks about the wrapping paper of it all. I can't go to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and say, hey, my algorithm says this is a good loan, you should buy it. They'll say, great, there's 1,253 pages of guidelines in there. If it doesn't pass, you're going to buy it back. And it's a binary thing. It's not a overly complicated thing. It's just tedious. It's just rules. It has to pass against rules. So I think sometimes it's more overblown on how we think about AI and how AI is going to solve this problem. And this is a very similar discussion to things like blockchain. We're talking about like the end result versus getting there. And it gets back to data. If you put AI on top of the standard, traditional, mostly used LOS that's out there, and you said, what's the status of my loan? It would tell you nothing that wouldn't be obvious at the highest level, which is, hey, your loan's in processing. Because any of that detailed data is not persistent. So you couldn't even train the AI with it because it doesn't even have context to that lower granular level of data. So if it did, though, imagine the problems we would solve, right? If we're able to expand our industry data model, put better data management and governance on it, because you need that to make this data usable and decision ready. Imagine what you could do with AI on top of that for customer engagement, risk management, all those other fun things. But everyone's talking about AI, but no one's talking about the fuel that makes AI happen, which is data. And I think that's the part that we need to really mature our thinking, because we're all reactive in this industry. Sometimes we jump to buzzwords, we jump to what sounds cool. We're going to be talking about AI for the next X number of years if we don't solve for data. And don't get me wrong, there are use cases that we use today: data extraction, even marketing and customer engagement, trying to figure out what the right offer to give the customer at the right time. Good guesses. We can't guess in making decisions for our customer, because to your point, Julie, there's a person behind there that needs real, genuine help and not just guesses. So at the same time, I don't think AI is overkill for what we need to make real loan decisions. I think it's just basically rules. If you had the data managed in a really effective way, it's just basic rules.
Yeah, I think it goes back to Rajan's point about it being either a deterministic or a predictive model, right? If you're using a Facebook score, a social score, to predict the ability to repay off a borrower, that's predictive, right? But if you're running it against a bunch of rules, that's clearly deterministic, because you're running up against a binary number of data points, right? So I want to come back to you, Rajan. I think the technology has evolved today so much that I think you could index most of the documents, extract most of the data. But where do you still see challenges in automating with either some of these processes or some of the documents? What types are more challenging typically? You're muted, Rajan. You're on mute.
Sorry, I don't know how I went on mute, but no, it's definitely the technology has definitely evolved, right? I mean, it's gotten, compared to even what it was 10 years ago, with some of the things that we can do today, with some of the extraction techniques, technologies, machine learning, deep learning. I mean, there are better techniques, better technologies to get there. So things that would be really considered insurmountable, like automating extraction from documents like bank statements, pay stubs, is definitely feasible now. But within that, it's just the variations. It's a combination of variations and unstructured, non-standard, right? So that kind of drives the different permutation combinations. But again, it's a matter of just training. I mean, just training the models, and the models get better, and as they get better, they handle all these variations. So it's not. I don't think there is any such thing as like a tough document. I mean, if you had asked me this question 5-7 years ago, I would have had a different response. But of course, technology is evolving. I mean, it's always there. But I would also say that there is always a need to temper what the automation can do with the right type of human kind of oversight, right? Because you want to have technology that can alert you with confidence scores, right? In terms of, this is the level of confidence that it has extracting these set of data elements from these documents. So you can direct some human attention to it. And ideally, what you want to do is you want that whatever is the humans doing to go in to train the models, right? So it's continually kind of feeding itself. And again, 5-7 years ago, very difficult to do. Now, very feasible, very possible. It's a question of how the solution is architected. And I just come back to this. Is like, I've not spent time on the lender side. That's one thing. Obviously, worked with a lot of lenders as a service provider, but not on the lender side. But I would think that when you look at making sure that data extraction related, which is data entry or data extraction related tasks, or indexing, or those document classification related tasks, I mean, I would think that most lender services would like to have something that is just gets done, right? I mean, it's not something that they want to deal with. I mean, it's like, why do they? It's not as value add as some of the other tasks that we saw: processing, underwriting, get everything done correctly the first time around. So I think that's where the industry is moving, and should continue to move to, is to get it done the right way the first time around. And I think what we'll see is the LOS. The LOS is also evolve, right? It's given how our industry is structured with the big LOS players, it's like moving a giant cruise ship, right? I mean, it takes time because there's already a path, already a trajectory, there's already investments that have been made, but now that there's the access to data is going to be so ubiquitous, we'll see that as a business opportunity. I mean, I think that at the end of the day, tech vendors, if they see that as a business opportunity, they will make the put in the investment dollars. And I think that's going to benefit the industry. That's going to benefit the entire ecosystem, actually. As I don't think there's one player that's going to emerge who's going to control everything, but I think Nate's wish that there was one place where everything feeds in. I still think that place is the LOS. I mean, eventually, in whatever form it takes, right? I mean, not the current LOS, right? The structure, but eventually, whatever form that takes, maybe we don't even call it an LOS, we call it something else. I think that's where we start seeing the real benefit of some of these enabling technologies. Till such time, we still have to think about, we can always talk about this utopian world, but then we have to now deal with reality. In reality, you still need indexing tools, you still need data extraction tools. And I think they all, as they evolve, and as some of the other larger initiatives evolve, they'll all start feeding into each other. That's kind of my thinking, and I see that as a real possibility with where technology is today and where it is headed.
And if I can jump in on one point there, because it was so important, I totally agree. I think the pace of change we all recognize has never been greater. I think the lenders I see who are starting to, again, widen that distance, they are very cognizant of the pain points, the pinch points. So even if it's that they're starting to introduce AI into their contact centers, and they're able to identify patterns in customer challenges and being able to educate their team. I personally remember sitting every Monday in leadership team meetings, listening to recordings. And to be able to now use AI and say, hey, these are pain points, and it's going to help feed my prioritization. And oh, by the way, I'm going to use AI and write my user stories, and I'm going to be able to identify patterns. We're going to use AI to identify weather trends and extract data in our servicing space so that we can alert folks to disaster recovery and assistance. Those, to me, being able to get really crisp on customer pain points and bring those to life and start to solution them and get teams with hands understanding what this is before the utopian LOS is available. I think those are all important places to start.
Yeah, and I think I agree too, Rajan, about the LOS is the centerpiece. They should be the centerpiece of it. It should be the solution that anchors these things together. And then I think to allow that to happen, and I think greater innovation to happen, I think as an industry we need to mature in product management and product strategy on these things too, because like this is a really rich, great conversation that a handful of us are having, and it seems like there's an alignment of quote getting it right, but those points of view have to transition into how we operate as companies. So, example, I've reviewed 5 or 6 really great data extraction and data processing solutions out there. All of them had the answers, right? Which means they could take in data from direct sources or from documents, enrich them, verify them with humans in the loop too that data is good, processes them against calculations and derived values, and process them against rules, and then almost always would though just push the information back out into a report, into something that a underwriter could consume. And about the 6 I talked to, and really in depth, I made the same statement I've made to you guys, which is you already have the answer. You already have the solution. How come this isn't integrated into workflow? How come you're not just making the decision and allowing others to consume the exceptions as it should be? And they literally, this is almost verbatim. Nate, I hear you. It makes a lot of sense, but we talk to the underwriters, and this is what they want. And so I think sometimes it's kind of like the iPhone. No customer, no consumer ever told Apple what the iPhone needed to do and how it needed to operate, but they needed to listen to the problems they were trying to solve. It's not an underwriting problem. It's a customer and regulatory problem. It's an investor problem. And if we start from that lens, it doesn't, we can start crafting solutions that trigger these, different solution points to come together. I think that's part of it. We need to evolve from a product strategy perspective in this industry too.
Yeah, I think perfect. I think, all of this is converging nicely into our next point, right? One is, obviously there is a customer point of view, there is a process point of view, there is a product strategy point of view. So given where technology advancements are, Rajan, I want to ask you, what should lenders look for as best-in-class capabilities when they evaluate a solution? I know, it's going to take a while for the industry to move to what we call as the utopian solution, which is the ability to have a single integrated data model, drive everything through workflow. But until we get there, how do lenders look at what are the best-in-class capabilities and how do they evaluate those?
Yeah, I think, again, I started my last question by saying that one of my panel members should also add in, and I think Nate should add in here because he sits in a seat where he's, as he said, he's evaluated.
Yeah.
He's evaluated different service providers. So I don't want to cloud this discussion with just my perspective, right? Because obviously I'm coming at it only from one angle. So I'll state that disclaimer in terms of, in all fairness, of this forum. But I just think in general, I would think a lender, and this kind of conversations that I've had, is that something that is, when we talk about just getting the documents in the right folders, identifying them, tagging them, versioning them, things like these. I mean, there's a set of finite capabilities, and obviously there are many vendors who actually already do that today. So there isn't that big a gap as it used to be. Then the question really becomes how does that get maintained? With new variations, because there's always going to be, that's the thing about the mortgage business. I mean, there's just never a static set of documents or data sources. And the fact is, I think we should not also forget that we talk only about extraction, but that's not the only source of data, right? I mean, there's third-party data sources that are increasingly available in standard XML formats. I mean, can you consume that as well? So can you take that? Can you merge the data that you get from the documents? I think those are all capabilities that would be very important. And then how much work does my team need to do after all of this, right? We deploy all of this, we deploy all this technology. We have automation for the indexing, but even after that, there is, my team has to spend, 30% of the documents and it still is not in the right folder. So my team has to now spend time. I think that's something that lenders are increasingly asking, right? I think because they realize that after deploying all of that, there is still work that needs to be done by their teams. And by the way, I spoke to a servicer, very large servicer a few weeks ago. And their take was, because services have a different problem, right? They're either acquiring loans in bulk or it's flow, right? I mean, I'm talking about sub-servicer. So they're either acquiring loans in bulk or in flow. And they're coming in from different lenders, different sources. They try and impose certain standards in terms of how the docs get sent, how the data gets sent, but it's all over the place. So, they have chosen to just push it into their system. And so that the loans are boarded and then they will deal with it downstream. And dealing with it downstream, what it means is that when it gets to escrow, when it gets to default management, now they're going and sifting through a miscellaneous folder with thousands of pages. Right? I mean, now they're looking for certain things. So the cost, what happens is the cost is pushed out from onboarding downstream. They've just pushed it downstream. And they recognize that it's not like they don't recognize it's an issue, but they don't have a clean solution, because otherwise what will happen is the onboarding will get delayed. And that has, that has a ripple effect, right? In servicing, borrower effect, regulatory effect. So they've chosen that suboptimal approach. I think that's really where, that's another evaluation criteria is, how much can my team's work be reduced? So I think those are things that at least come to my mind. But Nate, as I said, you've spoken to many service providers in terms of what you look for. What else do you?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think I run into mostly are, and it's us as an industry that's the problem, right? Because you have suppliers that will come and position their products as a little bit more of a silver bullet. Hey, we can capture data. Our accuracy rates are, I'm making up a number. Some of them are like 87% or 95%. Like, it's got to be 100%. And I think that's a little bit of the problem that we put back on the data extraction providers or we don't appreciate enough. And it's to your point, all the downstream benefits. Like, I think making sure there's a human in the loop, or there's a data management process or data quality process that is learning and it does have humans in the loop. And it might be a little bit more costly, but we can't be telling our partners, no, I want to pay this little minimal amount of money, pennies, if you will, per document or per page, and expect the silver bullet. You need that, more of an enrichment process. You need that quality process. And if you could really trust that data at the point of ingestion, imagine all the things you can do with it, like all the examples you just gave. So I think we don't value it enough that we really should, because we don't value it as data. We value it as a data indexing and data extraction service. And we're not really thinking like we'd like to think we are, but we're not thinking about its downstream consumption. If we were, we'd say, I want 100% data quality, and I'm okay with paying this much amount per document and per page to get there, because I know I'm saving massive money downstream and I'm controlling my processes more effectively. So the ones that see that, the suppliers that see that as the opportunity and how you use the data, I think that's the partners you want to pick with, you want to work with. And the ones that are just kind of selling it for a low cost data extraction solution, they're missing the mark. And us as clients, you shouldn't be buying that, right? And we shouldn't be encouraging them to give us the cheapest possible data extraction solution. It should be, tell me how you're going to give me the highest quality data from this process and help me figure out how I'm going to get value from it downstream. That's who I'd want to be working with.
Makes great sense.
Yeah, that's good. And Julie, how do you see this? There's a question from one of the participants. How do you see this play out across the different industries? We've seen mortgages, but even outside of mortgages, and I assume commercial lending and small and medium business lending is beset with similar problems, because they have periodic audits and they go through reams and reams of papers and reports, right? So those are very adjacent types of industries. So, how are they looking at these problems? How are they solving? What can we learn from them?
Yeah, I think there's a general theme that I'm seeing everywhere. And I think it goes again with that pace of change and how quickly the models and the processes are getting better. I think we alluded to it. Those who can step back and actually push the boundaries. And I had, I'm going to go really outside the industry. I had the privilege of being at an event, and I happened to be chatting with somebody from pharmaceutical. I've never done pharmaceutical. I don't know much about their industry other than my own personal pharmaceutical and healthcare, and it's not exactly smooth and easy, as we all know. And this person was explaining to me how they're using AI in mammographies and where computer vision has been going. And if we can figure out, and again, still with human assist, let me be clear, but if we can figure out critical health diagnosis, you're telling me we can't get better at being able to consistently pull, to Nate's point, not 87%, 100%. I'll even go 99.9. My bar will be a little bit lower, Nate. But being able to get that to those standards. And I think, again, the more that we're using the models, computer vision, evaluating with human assist, thumbs up, thumbs down. This is what was wrong, giving feedback, making the models smarter. There are some lenders who really did dive in. They've done a lot around their own enterprise data, and they are able to do a certain degree of training against models, fine-tuning, RAG, etc. And they're able to actually do a lot more around their retention campaigns. And that's great. But again, those are more isolated than the norm. And those data leaders are still, again, a few versus the norm. For me, the use of AI in mortgage, or quite frankly, in financial services, it's still going to come down to transparency and accountability. And if your data governance, your data hygiene, and your data practices haven't been great, the AI is not going to solve for that. Going into this, I think if I was starting out right now, making sure that my teams have AI governance frameworks, making sure that there's explainability in every use case, I think those lenders may be at an advantage rather than hodgepodging. We're going to use AI for this campaign over here, and we're going to use AI over here. Thinking holistically and having those standards as you're implementing this, I think that's going to really help accelerate, and having your compliance teams very up to speed, not only up to speed of what the current rules are, but being able to help push where does the industry need to go. But explainability, transparency, and accountability are still going to be used. But others are doing it successfully. There's the positive.
Right. No, I think that's a great place to summarize, the nature of how this space has been. We started with where the industry is, what are some of the best-in-class capabilities, what are some of the gotchas that lenders should look out for, and really how can they implement a process that is transparent, accountable, and explainable, right? So over to you, Robin. We definitely want to open it up for questions. I'll hand it over to you to take it over from here and hear from the audience.
Okay, we do have there's a couple ways we can do this. For folks who feel like this is better for them, feel free to put a question into the question box or the chat. That works well. Alternatively, you can raise your hand and we can invite you on to ask a question. You might show up as a panelist, so just keep your video hidden if you do not want to show your face today. We do already have one question from Nick Larson. Is the concept of a confidence score as it relates to how well the AI has classified a document or document version? Is there a concept of a confidence score as it relates to how well the AI has classified a document or a document version, and also to the data points it is extracted? And if so, what was that confidence based on? Great question. I'm not sure.
I can take a crack at that. So yes,
Sure.
There is definitely most ML AI engines. I mean, they do have the concept of a confidence score. It is a score that is generated by the model based on several different parameters. I mean, and it varies model to model, but generally speaking, usually it's at a document level. It starts at a document level, and then what happens is that this is where whoever's the service provider, the solution provider, can layer in criticality of those documents. Like if there is a problem with the 1003, downstream has several significant effects. So if the 1003 confidence score is not very high, you want to flag that. But now within that too, there's specific data fields itself and parts of the 1003 that it can highlight, which has a lower set of confidence score, so which data fields are impacted. And they're really driven by factors like just quality of the image, because you're still working off images, completeness of the document itself. If not all the pages are present, I mean, it's not going to give a very high confidence score. It also, I mean, a lot of it depends on how the model itself has been set up. Typically today, what happens is in an AI, if you're using AI, I mean, you could use two models. You can have a champion challenger, right? I mean, you can say run it through run it through a model A, model B, collect the result. And today it's possible. I mean, it's feasible to do that. And then that's another way of saying, yeah, something's not matching up. So let's flag this, right? If it's or you could just pick one. You could set it up to pick one that has a higher degree of confidence. All of that is implementation specific at that point, but you now have all these different options to address that. And as I said, I mean, I think the solution that really is effective is one where the human gets involved, and the human, there's a human, it fixes it. It says this is the actual extraction, because they can look at the document, make the decision, but then that feeds back into the training of the model itself. So that's kind of how, I think that's a more practical use case.
Looks like Nick.
Yeah, I think of this. Yeah, sorry. This is a good example, though. When I talk about I say words like data governance, like that's right smack in the middle of all this, right? Data governance should include that inspection methods to enrich the quality or enforce the quality scores of our data. And to Rajan's point, there's kind of local quality that says, yeah, on this document, we have a high degree of confidence that this value, let's call it subject property address, is the subject property address on this piece of paper. So that's locally can be accurate, but there's also other things you can do to enrich that data and triangulate. So for instance, if it is subject property, it could be, you could compare it against other subject properties that you have or the subject property you have, and it could even increase the confidence more. But this is where you get into the deeper data governance. There's quality of the capture and there's the integrity of the data, right? And then there's if the data actually processes against the rules. So the other example would be maybe you can enrich that data and turn that property address into a geocode. And that geocode then can be compared to the subject property's geocode. Does it equal it or not? If it doesn't, then So you're touching on like a much bigger area, which is really, really important, because if you don't have that level of data management, data quality, and data governance around it, you really can't use this data effectively. So it's a really great question, and it kind of pulls the thread on what does data governance really mean in all this.
I'm going to allow Nick Larson to just chime in here, if just for a second, see if he has any more to add, because he did raise his hand. I don't know if that addressed your question. Hi, Nick.
Thanks for the answers there, Rajan and Nate. So as part of an implementation of an AI for this purpose, I imagine there would be quite a long lead time on, let's say let's focus on the 1003 example for a second. We've got a 1003 document that's been pulled from a credit package, and the confidence score on that is high. I would think that, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, I would think that part of the roll-on process would be to have a human there, or a team of humans, looking at that to say, yes, I agree with that, no, I don't, and here's why. And that feedback loop is what improves the data over time. Am I reading that right?
No, yeah. I think you're exactly right. Yeah, go ahead, Ranjan. Yeah.
No, I mean, yeah, sorry. I mean, that's exactly right. And as Nick mentioned as well, I mean, that's just specific to the document, but then you can layer in rules on top of it there, which it compares it across documents. So there's more layering that you can do, and anything that fails as an exception, that is something where the human can come in. So it's trying and pressure testing it, if you may, to see if that quality of the data fails in any way at all, especially when there's absolutely critical for the quality of the loan. But you pretty much nailed it. Yes.
Yeah, and I can just give you a quick example, Nick. Like, let's just use an insurance declarations page. We might go through a few thousand or a couple hundred all state insurance declarations pages, and we might build a lot of confidence that, yep, the AI has been trained on this. It knows that these are the right values, and our quality is perfect on it. That's great. You can't just set it and forget it. You need to move into more of a sampling mode then for that particular thing. So you turn that kind of automation on, if you will, in the framework of your automation that says, yep, I'm always going to use this data. I'm always going to trust it. But I'm going to sample X% of it to make sure it hasn't deviated every day or every so often. And you just need that, because what if the policy numbers now get mapped differently and whatever, right? Something changes on that document that the AI wasn't prepared for. You catch that if the quality score is degraded. If it didn't degrade, then at least your audit process would then say, hey, the deductible amount just changed and it's now throwing some false information. Let's go pull that back into our training model, stop anything that's in the conveyor belt that's been using that data. But you're going to need those inline audit processes as well. It just changes your process. You're not processing loans anymore. You're processing data. And we always say that phrase in this industry at webinars like this, but it really means that's what you got to do.
Wonderful. We do have another question from, it says Fred, but I think it might be Megan. So, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it. If a lender correspondent micro servicer obtains as much automation quality data as possible at the point of file submission, what are best practices for warehousing data for use in downstream processes, such as loan boarding, MSR transactions, developing granular pricing, and product development? So it's a very, very specific question, but if anyone has
that seems one that's good for you.
Yeah.
Take a crack at that.
Sure.
Yeah, for me, yeah. What
Yeah.
is that what you're saying? Yeah, great.
Yeah. So that's you've touched upon all this in your life, so you may want to take a crack at that.
Yeah.
No, all good. No, it's a really good question, and I hate to give you a boring answer, but it's the truth. The best practice is really having a robust data governance and data management strategy. To your point, that doesn't just think about it as marketing, application, processing, underwriting, closing, and so on. It thinks of this data, linear too, and horizontally across all of the value streams that consume it. So you're pulling on a really important thread, and it's the right question to ask. How do I leverage this data downstream? That question will, and it's a horrible answer probably from your perspective, but it gets answered when you establish data governance. And I hate to use the word because governance sounds like it's this big messy thing that doesn't really add any value. And I think the truth of it is it needs to be somewhere in the middle, right? It really needs to be focused on consumption and quality and how it drives value downstream. And it does take, participation. It does take data stewards. It doesn't mean you have to create roles that are data stewards. It just creates people that have to have the ownership of that data. But I think that's the string to pull on to really answer that question, which is how do I set up really effective data governance?
And that probably ties into a lot of what we see. I mean, we all know there is QC of the QC of the QC that's happens, right? I mean, there's just so many touches because we don't trust the data. We don't trust it. We just don't. And there is a use case. There are use cases emerging now where you can have the data that you have extracted, that humans looked at, that is being certified, be pushed downstream through the loan life cycle, right? I mean, it just in terms of there are certain types of loan reviews that are unavoidable. Like, Fannie requires a 10% review, right? I mean, you can't avoid that. You have to do it. But it doesn't now, part of what you have to do there is you are re-auditing the loan. If you're re-auditing the loan, then yes, then it has to start afresh. But then you can still repurpose the data that has already been extracted, already been processed, already been used to make the original decisions, be pulled down into the audit to be able to look at how the original loan decision was arrived at. So if the underwriter arrived at a certain set of decisions based on certain income assumptions, asset calculations, appraisal values, they all of those are values that exist and they have been certified, they've been approved. Is there a way to pass that downstream to the 10% audit that's happening, so that the auditor is looking at it and saying, oh, this is what the underwriter was thinking before they reviewed the loan. So you're not necessarily accepting those values as it is, because that's the whole point of the audit. You got to do it again, but you have now that view, which is invaluable in being able to provide the right feedback in the form of findings or exceptions. And then you just multiply that across just MSR transfers. I don't think we have a lot of servicers. Maybe we do, and I would love to hear from them in terms of what's your experience when it comes to boarding loans. It's just everything that we've heard of. is just, I mean, it's talk about data governance, Nate. I mean, in that world, it's just like a wild, wild west there, right? I mean, it's just data coming in from all different formats, all different forms, pulling all of that together, and there's so much. And then, Julie, to your point, real lives are impacted, right? I mean, this is people, homes, houses that are being serviced. It has a downstream impact. So I think more that the data can be cleaned and delivered downstream, the better. And I think while it's a little more expensive upfront, the value downstream is significant.
And start for Fred, a follow-up question sort of on it. I think start small. Like, I don't think you can ever start with data governance and data management as a big bang. Just start with core, like loan information, 12 values, 20 values, and start from there, and just start with something that at least gets some experience with it, and then just build to broader use cases from there.
Thank you. So one other question, and this might be good for Julie. There's a lot of different systems and add-ons. What's the best way to kind of reduce that friction when you're trying to start the process of working with a document automation?
Yeah, I would echo the same themes that we're saying here. Starting small, identifying what those pain points are, and looking at it as building blocks, Legos, not I'm going to have this provider who's going to have this piece, this provider who's going to have this piece. I think the industry overall, we've done a lot of that add-on, and now it's to the point thinking more comprehensively. Doesn't mean you have to use one provider, but thinking about if this is how the lead's going to come in, and this is how I'm going to extract in order to move it to an app, and this is how I want to bring in my property information. How does it all connect? And I got to go back and just reiterate one other point that Nate mentioned, data stewards. That, again, it's not a job description. It's helping people understand data is a different thing now. Data is going to permeate every part of your experience, and having owners of that data identified that have that responsibility and take it with great pride that they want to own that piece of the process. So I would say, as you look at how you're going to begin your journey, again, starting small, focusing on the prioritized highest opportunity areas. I know, I've used frameworks. Nate, I'm sure you have. I'm sure you guys offer frameworks. How do you prioritize how to get going in this? And thinking that you're not solving for this one piece. How do you solve it all the way through?
Those are great.
And I'd just like to take that a little one further. I mean, and I probably also want to open it up for the rest of the attendees. I mean, please, this is a forum. This is not meant to be, the three of us have all the answers, and and we're like, we'd love to hear from you. I mean, it's just what's been your experience. I mean, there's one aspect that I just wanted to throw up there is, I think the industry still thinks about, fundamentally, the industry thinks about things in terms of widgets. They got to produce a widget. It's got to move from app to close and fund, right? Fine, that's where the money is. So you got to still think about it that way. Therefore, it's very process step driven. When you have to leverage automation to be able to speed things up, reduce the amount of friction, improve quality, improve productivity, you cannot just completely look at it from that widget production perspective. You have to, that's where if you have access to the data, how can that data now drive a lot of those steps essentially? So it's a fundamentally different view. And I think the ones who've really done well, from an origination perspective, are the ones who've actually made that switch. It's a mindset change. It is possible. It is possible the fact that there are companies out there who have successfully implemented it. I'm sure they have other challenges they're still dealing with. It's not like they've solved for it, but they've made that switch over the last 5 to 6 years. I think that's where I think more the industry starts thinking along those lines and less in terms of just the widget production. I think we'll see more lift from the technologies that we're discussing here today.
As a follow-up to that, Rajan, we are coming kind of close to ending this here so that folks can get back to work. But I do want to follow up with one or two more. What is the easiest and fastest process to migrating to automated indexing. And I think you just made a couple of points on that, but one thing that, I would kind of add on to that, is it important to go fast at this now that, like, after hearing some of your comments, I feel like that's a good part too of that question. So
I mean, indexing, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know the fastest. I don't know how to really, maybe Nate, you can answer that. But I think the key is, first of all, I mean, your ecosystem is the LOS. You have to be able to, whatever you do, you have to be able to pull docs and data out of the LOS and push stuff back in. So the integration becomes a key. I mean, integration is almost like table stakes, right? I mean, we didn't even discuss it because it's that obvious, right? You got to have that integration. But once you have that integration, it's really around, I'll go back to the subservicer example. They have this miscellaneous folder problem. I mean, it is a real problem. They call it a miscellaneous folder problem. It's just stuff that gets thrown in there. Maybe that's where you start, right? I mean, for them, that's where they get the most lift. If their sellers or whoever's selling them or their clients are sending them the docs in a certain format and they're going into the right folders, those folders are not the problem. The problem is there's miscellaneous folder. So maybe that's where they would start with. I mean, that's clearly their priority. Whereas when you look at a retail lender, a lot of the docs are get put in the right folders by these third-party integrations that they have. But then again, they have a similar miscellaneous or unidentified docs folder problem. So you start addressing those issues. So you just I think the benefit is to not come in and try and like change everything, because your ultimate source of truth is still your LOS or your doc management system. I mean, you can talk about replacing it, and if Nate's vision comes to reality, where you have this central repository, right? I mean that, and by the way, there are providers out there who are working on it, but it's a massive project. It's a massive undertaking. It requires tremendous amount of funding. But in the meantime, we have these opportunistic areas that we can tap into that will help, and they'll give immediate relief to the operations folks. I think that's really a place to go and to tackle.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is when you talk about what's the quickest or fastest, and I think it's really about being focused on what problem you're trying to solve and what outcomes you're trying to get. And to Rajan's point, there are outcomes you can get early on that take friction out, maybe save steps, improve quality. But I just understand where you're ultimately going and understand how the interim steps are going to give you immediate value along the way. I think we get really disconnected from value, especially on this topic, because the solution is the solution, right? If I implement that data capture, good stuff will happen. Instead, it should be, well, hold on, I'm trying to get to a place where my document inventory is very accurate and it reduces a lot of searching time and customer friction. Cool, let's start with that, and then let's move that into what use case can we then leverage this data more effectively? And what is that benefit? Is it reduced time, improved experience, whatever it is? But let the outcome drive the solution. And to me, like, it isn't really about fast or slow. It's about what is the outcome that you're really trying to get out of it.
Great. And I think we should end on a fun last question. So I'm going to throw this out there on my own here. In the beginning, you all mentioned that, some of the same problems existed 10 years ago, and we're still kind of struggling with some of the same stuff. What is your prediction for solving some of these challenges? How long do you think it's going to take? Do you feel like this is going to be a never-ending journey to become like the fully digital mortgage with beautiful indexing and seamless data interaction?
I never thought that those words would be ever uttered. I can say I'm an optimist. I mean, I've seen technology evolve. I mean, it's just and I'm a technologist at heart, so maybe I'm a little biased there, but I have seen it emerge, evolve, the things that it can do today, but I think, again, it's not a technological problem. I mean, it's like it's just technology, a lot of technology to do all this stuff. So it's really comes down to, is the industry, are we as an industry willing to make that shift in the way we think about the origination of the loan? And I see that change coming about. I think that's the part. And I'm also seeing it across other stakeholders, like Fannie, Freddie, and the investors, right? I mean, it's not just an industry issue. I mean, I say industry is not just originators or services, it's that ecosystem that surrounds it. I see that happening with the investors, with the GSEs, with the private investors. And I see that is very encouraging and positive. And moment you do that, all the technology that's here, they all start coming together. I mean, you can harness them. I mean, I've always maintained it's not a technology problem. I mean, there's technology. We have more than enough technology, more than enough capabilities, more than enough horsepower in this industry to be able to do the stuff, right? Do the work. It's really consuming it. It's really using it. So and that's where I'm very optimistic, because I see that, and especially the last 2.5 years of downturn in the industry, that has sharpened a lot of focus. I mean, because let's face it, it was terrible. I mean, it was terrible for most of us, right? And you have to have learned from it. I mean, I think the industry in general has learned from it, so therefore I'm very optimistic.
And if I may, I'll jump in on the optimism thread, if I may. So I would look at it in terms of 4 kind of pillars. To me, the fact that we have a panel today, and thank you again, where we're talking about mindset shift, where we're talking about data as an asset, not data in this piece of the business or that piece of the business, I think that is a huge shift. I agree with you, Rajan, on the industry. Absolutely. There has to be that. And there's nothing better than tight margins to be able to drive change. So I think that's a great thing. I would say the technology, in my opinion, I couldn't be more optimistic. I believe the journey is early, but I have not seen anything that could not be solved to the point that it's mind-blowing now. But the last one I'll just reiterate is skills. Upskilling, reskilling, change management, people management, that has to be part of this as we're thinking about this topic. Nate?
Yeah. No, I think I'll get on the optimism bandwagon as well. I'm always been very critical of the technology support, because that's my job, right? Isn't just to shrug my shoulders and say, I guess this is as good as it gets, but to challenge partners in the industry to go after it and create better experiences for our customers and really help them aspire to achieve their dreams. That's really what we're here to do. I have seen a lot of good progress by big players in recent year plus that shows me that there's good momentum going in the right direction. And I think I totally agree with Rajan. It's not a capability gap issue. It's not a technology issue. It's a collaboration issue and prioritization issue. And I think I'm really looking forward to new entrants and other folks that come into this market, because all it's going to do is just force us all to really get focused and improve. And I see that happening. And I think, Julie, you added a point that is just super, super relevant, which is these are all really interesting, fun conversations. Some of us are actually trying to do these things that we're talking about, but to do it, it's a monumental change. And like Fred, with the question we had around data governance, all these are really good questions, and it touches on these aren't just quick hits. These aren't just quick things. It is leadership down, changing perspectives, changing attitudes, and really understanding that this is a transformation of your business to do it this way. Completely different than what it's been done decades before. But the benefits are amazing. And if you don't do it, I don't know if you'll be in business 10 years from now to compete with the companies that are doing it. So,
yeah, I think, and I agree with all what you're saying. A lot of us tend to forget, the ecosystem point of view. There's a principle in law called cui bono, right? So who benefits from this? If you look at the major changes in this industry, those have been driven by GSEs. Think about AUS, think about day one certainty. So to go back to Nate's point, unless the investors and the secondary market systems support it, it's not going to be driven to the front end. So technology capability is far advanced now, as we can see in the past 3 years. It's gone beyond comprehension. So I think capability is not an issue anymore. It's the underlying ecosystem's ability to absorb a digital exchange, to absorb digitized data, and support the origination of loans that's really going to drive the transformation of the industry, is what I would say.
Wonderful. I have no other questions. But we are very grateful to our panelists, all of our panelists today, and to Narayan for navigating some of these key points. And we're very thankful for those of you who took the time to join us, and we appreciate the good questions. We hope that you come to the next Genius to Genius Forum. And again, if you want to participate and help advance the use of automation and other emerging technologies, we encourage you to go to g2g.indicom.com, and we will have a form there for you to fill out and submit your ideas, and we'll give you a ring or put it on the schedule. So again, thank you very much to everyone, to our panelists. It was wonderful. I really enjoyed all the conversations. And if anyone has questions, just shoot us an email at geniusevents@indicom.net. Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful.